Yeah, I might just get a bit of paper just in case I have some incredibly great ideas while we're recording and I could scribble them down.
It's going to be a very small piece of paper then.
Back of a postage stamp. Hold on.
The Tyre Kickers Classic Car Chat with Max and Matt.
Welcome to episode 58 of The Tyre Kickers. Fresh from rolling around the countryside in my new roller, we're back in the studio and ready to talk classic cars.
Yes, coming up in this episode, Prime Ministers and their motors. Rovers, Daimlers, Jags. But which PM had the best wheels?
And why do our dear leaders now drive Audis?
The Tyre Kickers.
Also, is it time to see the light? With almost every car sporting daytime running lights, do our classics now need them to avoid getting hit by dopey drivers?
And after Cars in Pop videos, we investigate which celebs came a cropper in their motors. A slightly morbid top 10 coming up.
All that plus your thoughts on young drivers, old rollers, and which one of us should be in panto.
It's all to come in episode 58 of The Tyre Kickers.
Oh no, it isn't.
The Tyre Kickers podcast in partnership with Footman James.
So, you may have noticed in the UK we're going to get yet another new leader pretty soon, probably our third this week. Now, Max and I don't do politics on this podcast because, when it comes down to it, talking about, Morris Marina spec levels brings more joy than doing that. But we are going to sail a little bit close to the wind for this next one. We're going to talk about a subject related to politics.
Yes, with that revolving door at 10 Downing Street, at least we do get a good look at what cars our leaders are tooling around in, which got me thinking, which Prime Minister since the Second World War has had the best company car?
You know what, Max? I notice our current leader is tooling around in an Audi A8, which is a bit of a shame. We were once proud car-making nation. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that PMs used to get driven around in British-made cars. And also, you've got to remember, actually, it's maybe not so much of a big deal now, but it used to be quite a big deal what they drove, a few years ago, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a massive political deal because you didn't really want to look flash as a PM, but equally you don't want to look on your uppers turning up in a marina. Plus, rolling in and out of Downing Street is always that clip on the news. And what car you're in, I think, tells a story.
Yeah, so it's been quite visible what cars PMs have been driving, but I think we've forgotten over the years. So let's wind it back in time to see what the PMs did drive. Now, Max, do you remember the war?
What, the First World War?
Crimea, the Boer one. That's when you went to school. Let's start just after the Second World War, because our first post-war PM was Clement Attlee. Now, he was Prime Minister between 45 and 51. Now, let's look at his transport. On tours around the UK, it was actually his family car, the Hillman 14, driven by his wife. Now, by 1951, they'd actually chopped that car in for a Humber Hawk, possibly a Mark IV, which was also used in the 1951 election campaign. And actually, Max, on election stop, one of the local papers noticed in Huddersfield, they noticed that Mrs. Attlee was driving the Humber, which was gunning it so fast that the police escorts were struggling to keep up. They said she was driving it with considerable dash.
She was known to be a very fast driver. Now, there's actually some historical debate about whether Attlee was driven to Buckingham Palace by Mrs. Attlee in 1945 to become Prime Minister in actually the family Hillman. But here's a photograph of them campaigning in it. And you can see the Hillman, you can see Violet Attlee at the wheel, and tucked down in the passenger seat is Clem, looking pretty scared, to be honest, because she did have a fearsome reputation as a driver. But I do like the kind of naivety of the British leader being driven around by his wife. It's quite sweet, really, isn't it?
Yeah, this old photo, as Max described it. I mean, Mr. Attlee, Clement Attlee's it looks like one of those shots of a husband and wife who just had a row, basically, because he's looking a little bit meek and she's like gunning it out the window to get the car moving.
That's what you call tight-lipped, her face, isn't it? She's tight-lipped.
But obviously going right back, you think of now, PMs are driven by their staff, which we'll get into later. But, back in those days, it was just a needs must, I suppose, after the war. The Prime Minister needed to move around. There wasn't a lot of fanfare. There wasn't a lot of money after the war either. So it was just a case of like, well, are you okay to drive, I guess?
Take the family car because the government didn't provide you one. Normally because, to be honest, Prime Ministers up until Clement Attlee, they usually had a lot of money. So they had their own cars. He didn't. So he was reduced to using the family car. And I think that's why Violet was driving it. So it's a very unusual, very quaint kind of British thing.
Well, those were Roots Group's cars, but they got binned by Churchill when he came back as the boss in 1951, Max. Now, he had what we'd call like a government car, a Daimler DE36 limo. That was for day-to-day work, and a Rolls-Royce Phantom 4 for the ceremonial stuff. Now, the Daimler, the DE, was a bit of a bruiser. It had a straight 8 in it, and it proved also to be a really good export. It was sold to governments and royalty all around the world, wasn't it?
Yeah, and there's a great photograph of it here. I just want to take you to one of these photographs. It's up on your screen now. You can actually see the car, and it's a pretty kind of standard. It's a bit pre-war looking car.
Oh, yeah.
It's quite nice. It's all right. But if you look at the engine bay, it's the straight 8. Now, when was the last time you saw a straight 8? 8 cylinders in a row. And you
Massive.
can see, yeah, exactly. It's huge. No wonder the bonnet was so big. And you could see all 8 spark plugs along there. So the straight 8 was quite an interesting engine for that, but it didn't last very long.
Just looking at these pictures, I mean, it's a little bit funereal. It does look like an old school hearse, this, doesn't it? I mean, it doesn't look very showbiz.
I think that's because it is a hearse, because
Is it?
they built various bodies on top of these chassis, and the only DE36 I could find for sale in the world, I think, is this hearse. So yeah, I mean, from the back, it's probably not as Churchill would have been in it, but from the front, that was what the DE36 looked like. And basically, it was a chassis, and you could build a body on it. But it's still quite an imposing car, but a little bit boring and a little bit grey, isn't it?
So yeah, this is the dead ringer of the car that Churchill would have had.
Yeah,
see what I've done there?
I did, yeah.
Right.
Why don't you write that down on your piece of paper? So anyway, Churchill created the government car service in 1952, and then the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, and the Home Secretary were given full-time cars and drivers. And going back to roots, Humber Pullmans. Now, they had a push-button radio, wow, independent heat for the chauffeur and passenger, and for Churchill, an extra-large ashtray for his cigars. 4-litre engine, 80 brake horsepower, top speed is 73 miles an hour, but absolutely pig ugly. If you have a look at the Humber Pullman, it's a really, really ugly looking car, and that's up on your screen now.
Oh, that's a bit nice. Yeah, that's a car that only his mother would love. Are we going to put pictures of these cars up? Because we get complaints if we talk about a lot of photos and don't share them.
Yeah, we'll put these pictures up because you'll need to see the Humber Pullman just to realise how actually ugly they are. But during the Second World War, car production stopped because people were making other things, planes and tanks. So car production basically ground to a halt, and so did designs. It's a kind of pre-war design, this, isn't it? But very, very ugly car. Now, they were used pretty much all the time. They were used by Anthony Eden, 55 to 57, Harold Macmillan, 57 to 63, and then Alec Douglas Holmes, 63 to 64. But then we're into the 60s, and things started to change.
The big old Humber got biffed for something much more exciting, the Rover P5, and then later the V8 P5B. Now, the reason for the Rover, Rolls or Bentleys were probably still too flash by then. I mean, Jags were too sporty, and in Mark II form, probably far too small as well. Remember, it's all about the graceful exit. It's the rolling up into Downing Street and getting out of it and being seen and being in front of the flash bulbs. Harold Wilson in 64 to 70 was the first to enjoy the Rover, apparently with another extra-large ashtray for his pipe max.
That seems to be people smoking in the back of these cars seems to be a feature, doesn't it? Well, I mean, the Rover was a fantastic car. The same model was used for Heath, 1970 to 74, and then Wilson again when he came back, 74 to 76. Although because of industrial action, there were so many strikes, his Rover was delayed for a while and he had to use a 5-year-old Vandenpla Princess. Then Callahan, 76 to 79, used the same model. So in the late 60s and 70s, the Rover P5, the first one with the Rover 3-litre straight 6, and then the V8 P5B was the car that did sterling government service. Now, this is the time, I think, that government cars became interesting, because if you look at one now, here's one for sale at $14,995 in Bordeaux red, a 1969 P5B Saloon, not the coupe. I think they're really good-looking cars.
I think they're very statesman-like, aren't they? I mean, they're now with our modern eyes, they're kind of a little bit of a frumpy classic, but I think they're quite statesman cars, aren't they? They're when Rovers were Rovers.
Yeah, and I think it's a very good design because it looks slightly sporty. It had a hint of sporty because it was the 1960s, but it still looks formal, and you could turn up outside various, government events in it and not look too flash. So it did walk that tightrope of government cars, and I think that P5B, for me, was probably the best one since the Second World War.
You've glossed over a little bit there, which is actually the most interesting bit you've said so far, which is saying something. The fact that Wilson had to use a 5-year-old Vandenpla Princess. I was like, I'm not going in that. Well, I'm afraid you are, because there's nothing else.
Tough, because his Rovers, because by this time the Rovers were being specially built because they were armoured, and there was various strikes going on, which meant that they couldn't get the P5B for Wilson at that time, so we had to tool around in that Princess. But it's the 1970s, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, driving around in Rovers well past their production life, though, was a bit embarrassing for a lot of PMs. So after the Rover, there was nothing stately and classy enough for a PM until the Jag XJ Series 3 body shape. Now, they're very etched in most sort of modern memories, although later they were actually Daimler double six versions of the XJ. Now, by now, cars were specifically and specially designed for prime ministerial transport and work, and Mrs. Thatcher wanted back to Britain. That was the big fly the flag thing, so picked the Jag/Daimler. Now, her car got armoured to withstand 3 rifle bullets fired at 10 metres. And also had an oxygen system to protect against gas attacks. Now, if you want to play 80s PM, there are actually plenty of Series 3s kicking around on the market. I found this one, Max. I'll throw this up on your screen. This is on a kind of well-known classic car website. It's a 1983 one, right-hand drive, automatic, 4.2 litre, 27,500 miles, 1983 in black. Would you want something like that? Would the prime ministerial connection make that exciting enough?
Well, you can play both Mrs. Thatcher and Arthur Daly at the same time, can't you? Because this is a car that kind of straddled those class barriers, because Series 3 XJs, were used by both Thatcher and Arthur. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because they were very popular, these cars. And I think they looked about right. If these pulled up outside number 10, you were quite impressed by them. The only thing about them is they didn't have much legroom in the back, so people tend to use the slightly longer wheelbase Daimler versions.
Yeah, if you've ever got in the back of an XJ, I mean, it's not really, it's quite snug, isn't it?
And also, if you put a load of armour plating in it as well, it makes it even smaller and heavier. So they're not that big, but the Daimlers were quite nice. And the Daimler double sixes, they did look decent. You could turn up to an event in a Daimler and look like you were the Prime Minister and not Arthur Daly. Thatch did like her Jags, and then after the Series 3 kept the faith with the XJ40 squarer design. Again with armour and oxygen, but badged as the Daimler Majestic, the long wheelbase one. Now, when Thatcher was driven out of number 10 for the last time, YouTube clips suggest it was an XJ40, registration F496PYT, that whisked her off to the palace. It had those funny oversized wing mirrors that ruined the look of the XJ40, but then, to be honest, it was never a very pretty car. And if you want to look at like a Prime Minister, this is probably the cheapest option to go for. It's on your screen now. They always remind me of John Major, these Jags.
Yeah,
the XJ40 was pretty boring, wasn't it?
Yeah, they'd gone a bit grey, hadn't they? They got squared off. They got rectangular headlights going on by this point. The deal sort of double headlights had gone. They got streamlined for the 90s, as we know. The 90s, not my favourite decade for cars. And although it still looked regal, and this is a very memorable, I think, if you were, our age in the 90s, you remember that as being the car that was on all the shots of Downing Street, pulling into the palace and all that sort of stuff. But I think in time, I think I prefer the double headlights to the previous version.
Yeah, and actually the next version was a bit better. The XJ40 was a bit of kind of like a forgotten design, wasn't it? Interestingly, on the videos I was looking of John Major resigning, the chase cars were police Rover 827s. Well, they look quite nice, those Rover 827s. Do you remember them? They were quite sleek.
Yeah.
They were also issued to cabinet ministers at the time. But if you were a junior cabinet minister, you could end up in a Rover 416 or a Montego.
Oh, the shame, wouldn't it?
You'd want to get promoted quickly, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would. You want to get out the greasy pulpit to get shot at that Montego. You mentioned John Major. Well, he continued the Jag and Daimler theme with the XJ40s and then went to give his resignation to the Queen in a Jag. We think it was a Jag with a plate H674XUC. As we've talked about, they were pretty dull-looking cars, but things changed when the wind changed, the politics changed in 97. Along came grinning Tony Blair with an X308 Jaguar. Well, what was an X308?
Well, that was the one they started to be a bit more modern. And the X308, then the X350, is a much more pretty and elegant car. Now, when Blair goes to the palace to resign, we're just going to fast forward through his 10 years, it's in PF53 GFV. So a 2003 registered car would have been the later X350. Now, these were aluminium-bodied unibody cars with the Cat's air suspension, which was that big step forward for Jag. They handle really nicely and are also great value at the moment if you want to be a Blairite. Here's a Super V8 long wheelbase Sovereign for sale. And this is a cracking looking car. Look at this, it's on your screen now. Black alloy wheels, just looks really sinister. They got this design exactly right. And I think because it was built with aluminium, it was actually quite a light car. And they do handle really well, these. Even now, these are great Jags to drive around in.
Yeah, it sort of pulled back the retro look and morphed it in with a modern feel, hasn't it? Again, still 4.2 litre engine, supercharged though, super V8 this one. And I agree with you. I think this one's got a little bit more. It looks more of a sleeper, doesn't it? Which is exactly what it is. More legroom in the back as well. It's just been brought up to date. Whereas the previous versions were kind of felt a bit of a hangover from the 70s, didn't they? Were very, very small inside.
I really think this could have been, was it peak prime ministerial car after the P5B? I don't know. Discuss.
Possibly. Now, we're only at the end of the late 2000s here. We've had about 1 million prime ministers since then. So we must speed this up because some people might be nodding off at the back. Let's go. So in our history chronology, Gordon Brown, didn't we? Then David Cameron, they kept using those 350s and 358s until the new shape of the Jag XJ arrived in around 2010. The shapely X351 designed by Ian Callum. Now, the 351 had a special armoured version called the Sentinel, which soon started rolling up Downing Street. And the Sentinel Max featured Kevlar to B7 ballistic prevention and could also withstand 15 kilograms of TNT.
Pretty impressive, that, isn't it? All in a Jag. But all that armour doubled the V8's 0 to 60 time from 5 seconds to 10. But I think it still looks great. I've kind of always been sitting on the fence with that design of Ian Callum's because it looks good from the front, but I think from the rear three-quarters view, those rear wheels look a bit lost. I don't know what you think, but it's a fine-looking Jag, and it's sinister enough when seen in a rear-view mirror. Here is a last-of-the-line 2019 X351 for sale, again in black, and wow, this does look mean, doesn't it, from the front? As long as you look at it from the front and not the side and the back, I think they're great-looking cars. And also, it was a great-looking prime ministerial car. People would sweep up to the gates of Downing Street and sweep away from it again. Plus, quite a modern car, nice driving car again. And I think, those kind of ex-Jaguars, they really did a good job for the government and Britain in looking quite stylish.
I'm not a biggest fan of Jags, but I think they suit the brief for this quite well. I think they're quite good prime ministerial cars. And I think, do they make one now that would be good enough?
What, Jag?
Yeah.
No, because they stopped the XJs more, was the pity.
Okay.
So that's why they don't really make it. And
they could drive an old I-Pace, couldn't they? Be charging up every 10 minutes.
Good luck with that. But I think it's a real shame because we've lost that kind of advert, that global advert for British cars pulling up outside the kind of British headquarters of the Prime Minister, because now you've got this Audi driving around, which just looks bizarre. Why is the British Prime Minister in an Audi? Bearing in mind we still make cars. The royal family still tool around in those Range Rovers because they make the Sentinel Range Rover, the armoured version of that. So why can't the Prime Minister be in a Range Rover? Or why can't kind of some of our car industry get together and make a special prime ministerial car? A prime ministerial Lotus, a prime ministerial Bentley, a prime ministerial Rolls Royce. What would be so wrong with that?
I guess they always overthink these things in terms of what it looks like. Or do they? Has it just become the bean counters now? Is Audi giving them a better deal than somebody else? I mean, that's sometimes what it comes down to, isn't it? The dullness of procurement. But I think, the whole point of talking about these prime ministerial cars, they are attached to an era. I don't have a problem with our Prime Minister getting out of a Rolls. I don't think that looks ostentatious. It's one of our best products we make, one of the best cars we make in the UK.
The point of looking back at all the history of these cars is they kind of represented the era. So you got the P5B, the Rover P5, in that kind of swinging 60s, 1970s. That was the car of the moment. That was a serious car made by a serious car company, and it was one of the best cars in the world. Then you got to the kind of 1980s, you got the Jag XJ6 and XJ12, the Series 3. Again, that was a really good car. That was a world-leading car. Then in the kind of 90s and 2000s, you got the Jaguar XJ. So it's a continuation of how British cars were seen on a world stage. And now we've got an Audi. I don't know who bought an Audi, but Thatcher, in a kind of memoirs and in the talk of the government car service, actually there was huge debates about what car she should drive because they thought about the image they were projecting. Whereas now you're projecting the image of, well, it's an Audi. Okay, it might come off the shelf armoured and it might be cheaper. But what's wrong with the Range Rover? I think I'm going to write to the next Prime Minister, whoever that is, and say, Matt and I have got an idea. If you want to go around looking cool from the 70s, you can be driven around in a Stag. Or if you want to look prime ministerial, I'll volunteer my Silver Shadow to drive up and down 10 Downing Street. It might leave a little trail of oil, and it may not get to your big government meeting, but you will look like you are in a British car as a British Prime Minister.
You crack on with that. Let us know how you get on. Episode 58 of the Tyre Kickers, and yes, it's been a while since we sat in these chairs, and Max reeled off a load of stats about cars like Rain Man. what have we been doing since we last did this, Max?
We went outside into the sunshine and did coffee and chrome up in Gloucestershire, Prescott Hill, in fact, at the Footman James meet. Now, there was lots and lots of great cars there. We had a fantastic day out, met lots of people driving some weird stuff, some interesting stuff. Hello to all the drivers we met, by the way, and thank you for coming on our podcast. I think that's about 2 episodes ago, isn't it, if you want to spool back and listen to that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can go find out. We also got to meet Gary Mathers and Harry Metcalf from Harry's Garage and see their cars too. What did they bring? A Fiat and a Porsche, wasn't it?
A Fiat and a Porsche. You didn't say Fiat, though, to Harry's face, though, did you? You didn't say,
I might have done.
Or Harry, your Ferrari Testarossa is a Fiat.
I did call it a Fiat in front of him, actually.
Did you? He probably didn't hear you then.
Yeah, what did he have? A Testarossa, wasn't it? And a 928, wasn't it?
Yeah, so Gary had a Porsche 928, which he's selling in the next couple of weeks, actually. And then it was a manual one. It's a very nice one. And then Harry had his Testarossa, which he took to the Sahara and he took around Scotland, actually. So it's nice to see both of them. I've met Harry a couple of times and he is lovely. And I've never met Gary. And Gary was really interesting because he knows a lot about Rolls Royces. And I took my Silver Shadow there 3 days after buying it. And Gary was on it like a rocket and basically taking it apart and going through it. So it withstood Gary's deep post-purchase check, which is nice because I was a bit nervous that he might have said, "Oh, this is a Fiesta welded in two."
Yeah, it was nice, really nice to meet both of them. I've not met either of them before, and I've not met Harry before. And just talking to Harry, the thing that came across was how passionate he is just about cars, any kind of cars. He was getting excited about Citroen Diane that was there. Because, and you'd think Harry's got like a massive great car collection, pretty much put his hands on whatever he wants. And he's still getting excited about like a tin can, basically, with a 2-cylinder engine in it, which is great, which is what we like about cars. It's the fact it's not a snobby thing. We're not living in that kind of concours world, really. He dips into that, but it's nice to see that he's got a real kind of common touch and real kind of feel for cars, just all sorts of cars, which is great to see.
Well, remember, he's got a Silver Shadow, so that is the mark of good taste.
Apparently so, yeah. We're back at the next Coffee and Chrome, actually, in September, Max. So it's back at Prescott. There's also another one in October at the British Motor Museum near Birmingham. So if you want to sign up and come with us, just Google Coffee and Chrome. It'll take you to the Footman James page and you can sign up there. I might try and get my stag up to the Prescott meet. I'll try and do that. It's running all right, actually. I've been running around loads. What are you going to take? Because you've obviously started a massive collection of cars now.
A massive collection of 2. Well, it's a choice of 2, isn't it? So I can either take the Roller or the Merc. I think if you're going to turn up in the Stag, I'll turn up in the Merc because that's the kind of, I don't know, it's the Germany versus Britain kind of like match, isn't it? So that would be nice to see those together.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and if you've not heard or seen, obviously, Max has bought his Rolls Royce. It is a really nice Silver Shadow.
Have I ever mentioned that? I can't remember. If I mentioned it or if I just kind of like kept that quiet to myself.
Quite a lot. I might have to get like a Rolls Royce swear box that you have put a £1 in.
Actually, we'll the money to run it, to be honest.
I was going to say, it'll go towards your petrol bill. We have done a special episode on that as well. Scroll back and have a listen to that because Max wouldn't tell me exactly what he'd bought and brought it up as a surprise, and I had to guess. And I thought I was right on the money, but I got it wrong. But it is a really, really nice car, a Caribbean blue. Lots of love for it online, actually, Max. Some genuinely warm comments from people who really like the car more than you, actually. I think must be fair to say.
Well, I'm still in that early stage of getting used to it, and I'm kind of like poking around it, thinking, "Is that right? Should that be there?" So I did as I did on the episode. I took it to a kind of an expert, and he's had a good look at it and suggested a few things it needs doing. So I'm going to get that done in the next couple of weeks, I think. But yeah, got some really nice comments online, and you don't often say that, do you? Because no comments online are people taking the mick. Although there were some.
Should we talk about the nice comments?
No. Let's go to the ones where they were sarcastic, which is ones that you've written up, which is clear you're enjoying this a bit too much, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's more fun, isn't it, than people just going, wow, that's beautiful. This is Alan74 says to you, congrats on the car, but he asks, when are you doing Panto this year?
I don't see why a Silver Shadow is Panto. Why is the Silver Shadow seen as a Panto car? Oh, no, I don't.
He said he actually goes on to say it would look great parked at the end of the pier.
I don't know why that's funny. I'm not finding that funny at all.
Well, I'm getting you a fur coat for Christmas. Mark Mark 1 MGBGT carries on, says, lovely car, Max. But they're looking forward to the video of you trying to park it in Morrison's car park.
It's not that big. It's not that big a car, It's quite long, but it's quite narrow. So it's only a kind of Ford Transit size, so you can squeeze those into a car park. What I do, though, is like all of us with a classic car, is drive as far away as possible so nobody can possibly open a door and ding it.
Yeah, you've got a classic car if you're parking in that bay right in the very corner, away from the trolley park and away from any other sort of kids coming out of cars banging doors and stuff. One more comment as well that made me smile. Steve Clicky Clark picks up on the fact that it took you 2 years to find this car. Very dryly says, well, it's good not to rush into these things. 2 years of test drive. You had about 300 test drives, didn't you?
I took my time, but that's part of the fun. What's the point of rushing this? We're looking around classic cars. You've got to enjoy the process. That's what I think is one of the most interesting things about classic cars, is picking the right one, doing the research, picking it, and actually taking your time.
Yeah, lots of love for it, though, online. I mean, it is actually getting more interest than us just talking, so maybe we just put shots of that up.
Pictures of a roller.
Shut up.
Oh, God, if only. Lots of you were getting involved over on Facebook, too. Thank you for all the comments, likes, and ideas. Lots of positive comments, but I guess, Matt, you've been looking out for the sarcastic ones.
What makes you think that?
Which is your job,
you're right. Yeah. John Layden made me laugh on Facebook recently. I don't think you saw this one. He picked up on your recent moaning that you hadn't seen any classics on your recent road trip through France. Now, he says, if your eyesight is that bad, no wonder it took you 2 years to find a roller to buy.
I'm still disappointed with France. I still think France should be giving us better classic cars, given their fantastic history of making them.
Right, well, here we go. He lives in France, and he says he just popped out one afternoon this week and he spotted 3 classic cars, including a Renault 4 and a Willys Jeep. Now, he says...
hang on, that's 2.
Well, yeah, but he's got another one, which I didn't know what it was.
Right.
But he said if your eyesight's so bad, perhaps he suggests fitting a prescription windscreen to your car.
Well, my eyesight
can
may
see.
be bad. My eyesight may be bad, but at least I can count.
He did list 3. I didn't know what it was the third one was. Lots more banter on our feeds. Do get involved, and here's how to do that.
You can get in touch with Max and Matt via our socials. We're at The Tyre Kickers UK on Instagram and The Tyre Kickers on Facebook.
Right, what else have we been up to, Max, since we last sat down here and spoke? Well, I burnt my head driving my Stag, which is like a schoolboy error. It is, when you drive a classic car, you do pick up a nice sort of farmer's tan, don't you, over the summer? But I'd just come back off holiday to Spain, where I've been sort of, very conscientiously putting on factor 30. And as soon as I got in the car and drove 45 minutes to a car meet, I ended up looking like a giant beetroot. Now, I was a bit annoyed because I did look like a sort of Brit in Benidorm after just going to this car meet. The
problem with age is your hair is thinning and your hair isn't quite as thick as it used to be. So you do get kind of embarrassing burns on the top of your head in a convertible that you only notice when you kind of like put your hand through your hair and it really hurts.
Yeah, 2 things you do need is some sort of baseball cap or a hat, and then you need the factor 30 in your car so you can actually just sort of put it on.
Stag still going all right then? It didn't overheat. You overheated, but it stayed cool.
Stag's been going really well. Considering how sort of nervous I was about getting one, I've been really pleased with the car. Since August last year, I've done about 3,000 miles in it, Max.
Oh, that's good.
And I had it sat for about 3 weeks while I was on holiday for a week, and then you remember the weather was a bit rubbish about a month, 6 weeks ago. And I turned it over and it started first time. It ran superb. It was sitting in traffic, didn't get hot. We did an overnight trip away with it and down into the South Downs, which are great roads to drive. I mean, if you've got a car and you can get to the South Downs in the south of England and book into a hotel overnight, some of those roads are fantastic, and you can hit the coast and come back again. But that was great. I don't know how long I'm going to keep it, but it's been super, super usable. I've been surprised how usable it has been.
What stops up? What do you mean how long you're going to keep it? You think you're selling it?
Well, yeah, I'm only going to keep it. I said I was only going to keep it for a couple of years. I've had it for a year. I'll probably keep it for another year, and then I'll get something else.
But what about your research period? When do you start the research period for the next car?
Well, this is where you and I differ.
Not enough.
Well, I'll wait till I've got the money burning a hole in my pocket, and then I'll do some speed research like I always do.
But what are you thinking about after the Stag?
Maybe a coupe that's got a sunroof that I can roll the windows down. So maybe like the Mercedes 123 coupe, the C123, or the older one. But then they're a bit, I kind of think, are they a bit boring? Is a roof a bit boring? This will make your eyes roll. I found myself down a rabbit hole on 2 CVs the other day.
Did you?
Yeah. I started watching, I watched a bloke rescue one in France out of a barn, start up and drive it home. And then I sort of now want to drive one. Have you driven a 2 CV?
I have, and I love them for short periods, but I'm not sure you'd want one as your only classic because it's quite limiting as to where you can go, isn't it?
I fancy a go in one. If one of our listeners has got one and would let us come and have a little drive of it and maybe make an episode on it, that'd be fun, wouldn't it? Because you can barrel them round. I've been in one while it's barreling around a roundabout.
And they are great fun. Yeah, but they are really, really, really slow. It doesn't feel like you're going slowly in it, but when you look in the rearview mirror and see a line of cars behind you, you realise it's not a quick car.
Given that you've got a PhD in car and classic, what car would you recommend for me as my next car?
Well, I've always thought an XJS would be great for you because it's got that kind of slightly flash, slightly sort of 1970s, 80s wide boy look to it. So I think that's almost perfect for you.
What are you saying?
Well, there we are. I've said it, wide boy. And I've thought kind of 90s Mercs. I know you've got this allergy to driving a 1990s car, but a 90s Merc R129 is just got you written all over it with an electric roof and a V8. It'd be fantastic.
Nah, not feeling that. It's too modern. You know my rule. It's got to have chrome bumpers. You know, that's my rule. So, the cutoff, when's that going to be? Late 80s, isn't it, really?
Do you know, how about a Triumph Dolomite? I know you're a bit sniffy about Triumph interiors, but that is a great looking, great handling saloon car.
Yeah, it is. It is, but I think I've sort of done my Triumph bit now. I'd quite like a car where it doesn't look like it's just been built in a hurry. That'd be quite nice. If I had room, I'd keep the Stag and have something else. But it is a revolving door. I've got to if I do sell it, I've got to get something else, and it needs to be something usable.
Okay, well, there's a couple of episodes. I'll have to put a bit of thought into that. Then, what your next car would be, because I've always thought you'd suit an XJS because it's big enough for you.
I like them. I do like it.
What about the XJC Coupe, the 70s one? You used to like those, didn't you?
I do, although I sat in one recently and I kind of didn't like it. So maybe it was a duff one. Because we sat in that one at the NEC and that was all right. And I quite like that. But I don't know if it's more British Leyland, isn't it? Or maybe want something else.
If you go for an early one, it's kind of like pre-British Leyland, but no, maybe no.
I could go wild card and go for like an Alpha 105 Coupe or something.
Why would you do that?
Well, just why not?
Break down all the time.
Yeah, one to think about. While we're talking about listeners, actually, Max, we should give a special mention to 350 Munro, who follows us on Insta. He's a long-time listener of the show. He's based over in Australia. He's been going through a bit of a rough time lately. So just to say, we're thinking of you and thank you for being there from the start for us. But despite all that he's been through recently, he's still talking cars, Max. In fact, he dropped us a line to chip in on the why are young people not into classic cars debate that we were having last time. Now, he reckons part of the reason, and he says down in Oz, this is what he sees. He says most old cars here are just too expensive or just not desirable to young people. He says he sees loads of fixable Moggies, Vauxhalls and Triumphs just sort of lying around because no one's interested. Well, that's a real shame. I know you don't like Moggies, but it's a shame to see old cars that are so fixable. I mean, Moggies, you could just get a spanner set from Halfords and sort them out, couldn't you? So it's a shame, but
or maybe take them apart and kill them.
Take them apart.
But the thing about Australia is that the old cars are expensive, so I think that's probably what puts people off because it's very expensive to buy classic cars, as we found in Australia when we did that episode about it.
That's true. Yeah. Any more in the post bag?
Yes, listener Graham Turner has been in touch to say, I enjoyed your feature on classics in pop videos. What about classics where famous people have croaked?
Okay, slightly morbid, but I guess there is a list, is there?
Well, I mean, obviously, first one up has got to be James Dean in that Porsche 550 Spider, I suppose. I'm guessing that's the most famous dead celebrity in a classic car.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean that's the one that most people know, isn't it? I mean, if you think about just like in the UK, I suppose death in a car thing. And Mark Bolan was probably one of the most famous ones in the 70s, wasn't it? He was a passenger in a Mini 1275 GT. I think it drove into a tree, didn't it? In London, and his partner Gloria Jones was driving that. So that was big news in the UK, wasn't it?
Yep. Then there was Princess Grace. Do you remember she suffered a stroke in a Rover P6? And also earlier, going back to the 50s, there's a famous one where racing driver Mike Hawthorne died in a road accident near Guildford in a Jag 3.4 Mark I. Now, he wasn't wearing a seatbelt because that was the period when Formula One drivers thought it would be safer to be thrown clear of the accident.
Blimey.
Not always the greatest idea.
Paul Walker from Fast and Furious, he died as a passenger in a Carrera GT. That was fairly recently, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was 2010, 2011, 15, 16 years ago. Then there was, going back to an early one, Jane Mansfield was a passenger in a 1966 Buick Electra when it crashed into a tractor. That was a beautiful car, the Buick Electra. Yeah,
Jackson Pollock died in a 1950 Oldsmobile 88 convertible while drunk. That's... you could see why America started freaking out about convertibles, and you had that Nader era, didn't you? I mean, they were going to ban them at one stage, weren't they?
Yeah, but I think Jackson Pollock was drunk all the time, wasn't he? So possibly it would have been cheaper to ban Jackson Pollock from drinking rather than the Oldsmobile.
Well, yeah. So there's our not quite top 10 of people who came a cropper in their cars. If there's any we've missed, let us know. I mean, it's a bit morbid, but it's quite a curious thing to kind of run through. Get in touch on our socials or send us an email.
Send your ideas, comments, and corrections to thetyrekickersuk@gmail.com.
So, Max, the horn on my Stag, it doesn't work properly anymore.
Well, that's because it's British Leyland. What did you expect?
Well, no, it's not actually that. It was working fine, but I had to blast it so hard recently that it now just sort of whimpers.
Were you worried that people weren't seeing you enough and you thought, right, I've got to attract some attention to my bright red face?
You're not too far from the mark, to be honest, because I was coming up a dual carriageway. I think it was back from that meet where I burnt my face, and a dozy driver pulled right out in front of me at the roundabout. In fact, it was daylight, visible. I could see the driver there. I was coming up on the carriageway. There wasn't much traffic, and the car was there. And you know when you can see a car, you start seeing the wheels roll, and you think, I'm coming onto the roundabout. I can see it's. I think that's going to do something. And sure enough, it just literally drifted out in front of me from a stop and just slowly drifted out. I think it was a relatively new driver, but I had to bang on the horn. And I think I know why. I think it's because when you drive around, we're all looking for lights, aren't we? We're not actually looking for cars.
Yeah.
Daytime running lights are now so common that actually when you think about when you look down the road, it's the lights you're seeing. It's not actually the cars that you're sort of visualizing first. And for me in my small brown classic car, no lights on is maybe a bit invisible. And I think for a new driver, perhaps, who's just like learned to drive the next fast couple of years, 2-3 years, they've only ever seen daytime running lights. And suddenly a car comes on with no daytime running lights. And it's almost, are we a bit invisible? So here's my question. Do we need to start driving our classics with some sort of lights on?
Well, it's a good point, isn't it? Because the DRLs, the daytime running lights, the point of them was to be visible. And actually, if you see a line of traffic and 3 cars have got the lights on and the 4th one hasn't, you're looking at the 3 lights because your eye is drawn to the light, isn't it? That's what's sticking out at you. And that's what the point of DRLs is. So, yes, I do see that. I mean, I've had the same thing a couple of times in the Merc, which is a relatively big red car. And you'd think people would see it, but people do tend to pull out in front of you. Now, whether they presume because it's an old car, it's going to be slow, or whether they just don't see it, I'm not sure. But I have started driving around with my side lights on because I do think people do miss it. And there's been 3 or 4 times, actually, when people have just pulled out. And you're thinking, well, what more do I need to do in a bright red car? But I think people in a queue of cars behind me are focusing on those lights.
Yeah, I think you're true. And I've tend to do the same thing now. I found that, in summer when you're driving, you hit sort of like a wooded sort of part of the countryside. I either put my headlights or my side lights on just to so you can see it, because sometimes you're coming around blind bends if you're in the countryside. We're all looking for the lights now. So I found myself doing that, which just feels like an unnatural thing to do in an old car. But I mean, I was going to ask you if being in a bright car helped, but it sounds like it doesn't really make a lot of difference.
No, I think people are looking beyond us. And this is what motorbikes always used to find, which is why motorbikes have their lights on, is that people are just looking through you, if you like. And I suppose you remember in the kind of like 80s, Volvos had their headlights on all the time, and everybody took the mick out of them because you always had your headlights on. But actually, that was a really big safety thing because the research was showing that people noticed you with your headlights on. So maybe we should. The trouble with, classic car headlights is they're a bit rubbish, aren't they? So they're not even that bright. So compared to a kind of modern LED or a Xenon DRL, the classic car lights are just a bit average, but I suppose it helps. And again, the other thing about classic cars is our brakes aren't as good as yours. So you might pull out in front of us, but we can't brake as quickly as you can. So I think that's another thing that we have to be aware of, is that people don't see us and they don't realize that we can't stop.
Also, the other thing, I think the pace of driving has changed with EVs, as we've talked about. People are a bit more go-karty with them. Go, stop, go, stop, go, stop. And whereas you would have a bit of grace, in terms of in the old days, because cars would have to take a bit of a run up to get out of that roundabout. I suppose it doesn't stop someone pulling out on you, but you could kind of read the road a little bit more, whereas people are a bit more jerky driving, and there's more cars on the road as well, driving jerkily. I think it's sort of self-preservation. I think we do need to stick our lights on a bit more.
It's a good idea, isn't it? Because it's not going to hurt you in any way, shape or form to have your lights on. And it might just be that extra thing that people would notice you coming. It does make you look a bit like the Sweeney. They always used to drive around London in Ford Granadas with the lights on. So I'm not quite sure it kind of adds to the look, but, if it makes you stick out a bit. As if, to be honest, I would think in classic cars you stick out enough because people would notice the shape is a bit different. But if you can't be seen, what's wrong with that? Stick the lights on.
The next question it leads on to is one that will horrify you.
Right.
Should we put LED DRLs on our classic cars?
Absolutely not. I'm horrified. I'm horrified at the idea. No, because I think all of those add-on lights always look really, really rubbish. So I think that would be a bad idea. And you can see them sometimes. People put them behind the grille, or they tuck them underneath the bumper, or they stick them at the back, and you just think, no, they look awful.
I just think you've got to be mindful of it. Especially, I'm doing it more this summer since that car pulled out on me, and I think it's blown one of my horn. Sort of, it needs a whack with a mallet, apparently, according to the internet. That's how it's going to fix it. But it's being a stag, guess what? It's inaccessible unless you take the front grille off. So,
but that leads to another problem: that if you are angry in a classic car and you blow your horn, it never sounds angry because you lean on your horn, it goes beep. And
that's right.
Classic car horns never sound angry.
Mine was good. The stag one was, it's a two-tone horn. It's only a one-tone horn at the moment, but
I'd like those big air horns that you can get. It's an Italian manufacturer, isn't it? Again, so I have always found classic car horns to be a bit weedy and don't really project the anger that you're feeling at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to be switching my lights on and off, but I think it is a little bit preferable than being wheeled into A&E with stag embossed in my face as my head smashing on the steering wheel. I think it's a little bit more preferable to that, but I have become more conscious of it. I think if the next time you're out in your classic car and you're driving in the summer and you go into sort of a wooded bit or a shaded bit, just have a look at the cars without DRLs on, and I think you do struggle to see them sometimes. So if you're driving your classic, I think there's a little bit of self-preservation. But I agree with you. I wouldn't go down the line of putting aftermarket stuff on or LEDs or stuff. Just stick your side lights on or your headlights on. The only problem with that, though, Max, as we know, when you get out of a classic car, you don't remember you've left your lights on.
Well, the Mercedes has a buzzer. Which is one of those things that when I got out of it first after leaving the lights on, I thought, what on earth's going on? It's buzzing. It's one of the early things that Merc put on the SLs. But yeah, the roller doesn't. So I just have to come back with a flat battery.
Yeah, flat battery. Well, there's a saying and a phrase that you used to hear at every wedding, didn't you? And disco.
Oh, yeah.
We're the driver of a Ford Fiesta. You've left your lights on. Registration. Oh God, I have, haven't I? But switch them off. What do you think about these? The lights and DRLs. Do you think we need to do it, or do we need to stand firm and not put them on because they weren't fitted to the cars, or is it just a case of actually, it makes sense to do it, and perhaps it's better than being carted off in an ambulance? I don't know. It's a bit of a pain to switch the lights on and off, but I think the driving psychology has changed, and as we've talked about, I think as a driver now you are looking lights first, car second.
So that's it. Remember to write to your MP and demand the next Prime Minister must be driven around in a Rover P5B.
Or a Sinclair C5. Now, next time, what does your classic say about you? Why do we pick certain cars? And what are we trying to say?
Plus, how much is too much? Is an expensive classic car less fun because you're too worried about driving it?
That's all coming up in the next financially aware episode of The Tyre Kickers. So see you then. Bye.
Bye.
The Tyre Kickers podcast in partnership with Footman James.
Great. Shall I press record now?
God, can you imagine going through all that again?
God, I couldn't go through all those government cars again.